And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk across the glass.
Well, John, last hour I played you sound showing that President Joe Biden is being told by his advisors to make sure he doesn't trip and fall because he doesn't want to be the third story of elderly statesmen this week following Dianne Feinstein and Mitch McConnell. I believe he has also been told by his advisors, do not trail off into stories that don't go anywhere, because here he tries to stop himself from doing that.
But not a whole lot ever trickled down on our kitchen table. If you're middle class folks, I didn't get much. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs.
That was not edited.
Wow, he just started barking for no reason.
He realized he was about to go into another story about Claymont, Delaware, and stopped himself and went back to the teleprompter like a pro.
But not a whole lot ever trickled down on our kitchen table. If you're middle class folks, I didn't get much. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs.
Remember the time he was on The View and one of them asked him a question about Mayor Pete, and he started the answer with, back in Claymont, Delaware, we had a word for people like him. I better not.
And we never found out what it was, but I'm always curious.
Whatever it was, it would have gotten him canceled.
And then we went to sleep.
Have you bought your Powerball ticket yet?
No.
Apparently it's $1 billion again.
Already?
Yeah.
And then no one's going to win for 6 months, and then whoever does win won't show up because they know they'll get murdered?
Did you see how many armed guards the guy who won from Altadena now has? And some guy named Reggie is stalking him, claiming that he stole the ticket.
Yeah, that lawsuit's not going anywhere.
No.
But it shows you, even though you think it's going to solve all your problems, it's going to bring you nothing but headaches.
No. That man's life is going to end in a 911 call.
You know, any of these true crime shows on Oxygen are dedicated to people who got murdered because they won the lottery?
There's a guy in Modesto who is a dead ringer for Little Richard that won the lottery twice at the Stop and Save on Coffee Road in Modesto. Alfred Mitzenheimer.
Love that you remember that name.
Well, when I was driving down from Sacramento, I was in Sacramento for New Year's, and I stopped at the Stop and Save on Coffee Road in Modesto to buy my scratchers. Because if Alfred Mitzenheimer can win twice there, I can win once. And so I was talking to the proprietress of the store, and I was asking about him. And she said that he used to hang out around the liquor store all the time. And then he won the first time, and then he enjoyed being a man about town. And he still hung around the Stop and Save. And then he won a second time, and he just skipped town, and no one knows where he is.
The California Lottery still has the video they made about him from the first time 9 years ago.
Mitzenheimer says he was calm as a cucumber when he discovered his lucky ticket matched 5 of 6 numbers. But he did place a middle-of-the-night call to his niece and admits that's when the waterworks started.
I said it's $1,444,906, and we both started crying.
And that, if you see the picture of this man, I would love to know what kind of jerry curl and jewelry he bought after the $1 million.
That was before the money.
This guy looks like he buys his entire wardrobe at Sam Moon's secondhand knockoff jewelry.
Let me tell you, I'm already spending the money in my mind if I win this Powerball jackpot. And once I do, not if I do, once I do, Randy, I'm going on a spending spree. And everything I buy is going to be one great big monument to white trash excess. I'm going to have a great big guitar-shaped cement pond in the back and a house that will complement it. All right. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the show. She is the managing editor over at Red State, which you can read at redstate.com. You can follow her on Twitter at Jen Van Laar. Jennifer Van Laar, welcome.
You and Randy always have the most fun conversations when I'm sitting there on hold. And I'm just dying laughing. But, with all the luck, my personal life. Anyone who knows my personal life knows I have so many things that would only happen to Jen, like the weirdest luck. But it's never winning the lottery. So maybe that will change someday.
Are you buying a ticket?
I didn't know it was back at $1 billion, but now I am.
Oh, yeah. But I'll tell you, if you win that kind of money, it's one thing to have that kind of money, but if they put your name in the newspaper with one of those Ed McMahon checks, and everyone that you've ever gone to school with, everyone you've ever worked with, everyone you're related to, all your neighbors, everyone knows that you're worth that amount of money, you will spend the rest of your life being a mark.
That's true. And I'll have you as a bodyguard and like the person who can suss out who's BS and who's not.
Oh,
I'll pay well.
If I'm your bodyguard, you're definitely going to end up dead.
Oh, crap. I'll take that back. I'll think about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you want someone with some physical ability. That I can tell you. All right. Jennifer, so happy you're here. Let's start out with the big Hunter Biden scandal because there is a huge Los Angeles component to the most recent story regarding who is buying his artwork. We didn't know who was buying it for a very long time. And then Business Insider, I believe, was able to locate some of the people who purchased this art. And many of those names are big-time political Democratic Party donors who live right here in Los Angeles.
I'm so shocked. I never thought that would happen.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's not money laundering at all. It might look like it, but there's no way.
And there's all kinds of creative ways that these politicians use to do this because they're not allowed to be paid on the side. You can't take a bribe. That's illegal. But what you can do is you can hire their spouse. You can hire their children. You can't purchase products that they produce. That is something that, of course, has been very common. One of the ways that these politicians use to launder money is they write books that no one's interested in, no one will buy, and then people just buy a lot of books, and they get the royalties, and the money goes to them that way. It's very obvious what's going on here. The guy was a crackhead. The guy was strung out half the time. The guy was not even mentally competent to be a business executive or to be someone that you would certainly put in charge of a project that's worth a lot of money. As an artist, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just a big fan of dogs playing poker, but Hunter Biden's art doesn't seem to be the Mona Lisa to me, yet people are paying top dollar for it. This seems like an obvious case of funneling money to the big guy.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is. Yeah, sometimes people will pay for extra for a painting if it's by someone who's famous already. And I guess Hunter would qualify for that. I don't know what he's ever done other than being Joe's son to be famous. But that also goes to show that's why the people are paying the money is not because it's Hunter. It's because it's Joe Biden's son. And they said that they were going to keep the name secret. But we found out also that his attorney, the Sugar brother, bought a number of the paintings and that Hunter knew that. And the same dude paid off his taxes. So what does Kevin Morris want?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And it's interesting to me also that it took this long for us to figure out who was buying it, or at least some of the names of who was buying this art. Because if anyone should know how this scam operates, it's the news media. Because the mainstream media, they like to look down their nose at the tabloids. The tabloids, they're willing to pay sources for stories. If Jennifer Flowers has an affair with Bill Clinton and the National Enquirer wants the story, they're willing to cut a check to her so that she will give the exclusive to them because they know they're going to sell a gazillion copies. Those news magazine shows, Hard Copy and A Current Affair, they used to do that too. And NBC, ABC, CBS, we don't do that. We have ethical journalistic standards here. But the way they get around it, it's very similar to the way the politicians do it. What those channels do is they say, okay, we're not paying you for your story. We're not paying you to appear on our air. but you have to be exclusive to us, and we'll pay you an obscene amount of money for the pictures that we're going to use in the story, for the rights to the pictures, or travel expenses, or fill in the blank, where it's some BS excuse for them to funnel money to someone who they want for an exclusive story. And that's exactly what the politicians do. Well, we're not taking a bribe. We're not taking a specific payoff. We're just getting it in a different sort of way.
Right. But usually, at least with those stories in the news media, each side knows what they're getting. With these the people who purchased the paintings, do we know what they wanted? I think that's extremely relevant now that we know that the one woman got that was appointed to a commission by Joe Biden after she purchased the painting. So, what kind of discussions were that these people are not above saying, okay, I'm going to give you this much money and this is what I want. I mean, they made the deal with the Burisma guy. It's not like they're trying to make things secret. They didn't even make the Burisma guy go through intermediaries. So I'm pretty sure that these discussions were had. Maybe they were had with Kevin Morris.
And up until this point, we didn't know the identities of these individuals because it's not a political contribution. If you write a $1,000 check to someone who's running for federal office or even state office, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and that contribution will be published. If the FEC will make it public knowledge that you gave whatever money to whatever politician. But if you're just someone who's, quote unquote, buying art, that's not something that requires you to disclose it to anyone.
Right. But it was on the records of the gallery. And here's what I think. That's how Insider got the name of Elizabeth Naftali. And here's what I think is happening is, once someone, Hunter seemed untouchable for so long. It's not seeming that he's untouchable any longer. And apparently he was quite a jerk to a lot of people in L.A., as were some of his other Democratic pals, that like the Garcetti people. But when they're untouchable like that, as Eric Garcetti was, you don't feel like you can say anything about them. But now that the kind of blood's in the water with Hunter, people are thinking, maybe I can just leak some of this. And especially if they're people that maybe didn't get what they were expecting in exchange for their painting purchase.
Those are the people who are going to be the ones that squeal. The people who thought that they were going to get something for it and didn't. Or maybe someone did get something big for buying the artwork, and we don't know about that, too.
I would almost guarantee that there's stuff like that out there, because what came out so far was not really that big of a deal. I feel strange that I'm even saying that, but considering this woman really is someone nobody heard of, and it's a commission that, sure, it's prestigious, but really it's not like a cabinet position or something like that. So were there any U.S. attorneys appointed as a result of this? Let's find out.
Do you think there is more to this story than we know publicly so far?
Absolutely. I can't even really hint at some of the things I'm working on, but L.A. can be a very small town. I'll just leave.
It's interesting to me also that L.A. is playing such a huge role in this story because people forget about this. They think about Hunter Biden. They think about the laptop in Delaware. They see him at the White House with his father all the time. But Los Angeles was home to him for a very long time at a very critical point in his life.
And it still is. I mean, from everything I've heard, his still here. Their child is still here. He's still here most of the time. I mean, he was just at his lawyer's place last Thursday when the guy was smoking pot on the balcony, which apparently now Hunter can't be around that under this pretrial release agreement that he's under in Delaware. He can't be around drugs. And they made it clear that even though marijuana is legal in California, it's not legal federally, and he's under federal supervision. So it's a small town, and he has not always treated people well, although I hear the people in Venice kind of wish he was back there because the Secret Service at least kept some of the encampments cleaned up. But, things get around.
I didn't know that he moved out of Venice. Do we know where he is now?
He was in Malibu, up in Big Rock area.
Okay. Interesting story. And Jennifer, I suspect you're right. I think there's a lot more to come. And I think it's going to make what we know already now to look like small potatoes.
I agree.
Jennifer Van Laar, managing editor at Red State. You can read her online at redstate.com and follow her on Twitter at Jen Van Laar. Jennifer, have a great weekend and enjoy the warm weather.
Thank you.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, since the weekend is almost here and we won't be doing a new show tomorrow or Sunday, if you want to listen to us over the weekend, that's easy to do.
That's right. You go to KABC.com. You click on podcasts. That's one way. Another real easy way is to go to the Apple Podcasts app or Spotify or iHeart, and you can search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can also search for The John Phillips Show on YouTube, and you can download them all there or listen to them, add them to your playlist, watch them on your phone, on your TV. And that way, even if it is a Saturday or a Sunday, you can pretend that it's a
Monday,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and
Friday,
That is quite the compilation.
Monday,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and
Friday.
I wonder if Fran Drescher is upset and feels left out.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
You know, I'm really, really disappointed. We got the greatest press conference ever out of Fran Drescher day one of the strike. It was incredible. I thought we've got a new star. I made room for her on the wall. And she did a MSNBC hit here or there last week. She did this sit down with Bernie, but nothing this week. Absolute silence. So all I have is the clips of old that I listen to on repeat because I love my Fran Drescher.
You people are crazy. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You have to wake up and smell the coffee. And there was nothing there. It was insulting.
And you're trying to screw us as if you're like a land baron of feudal medieval times and we're your serfs. You know, it's like, wake up and smell the coffee. The jig is up.
I love her. Much longer is this strike going to go on to? Now they're postponing the Emmys.
Well, you know why you don't have any fresh sound to her? Because not everyone is like Cecily Maillard Cruz. She is the Energizer Bunny of screaming. Most people can only scream so much before their voice just goes out.
and I want you to be all the way pissed off.
Not her.
It's what right now. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a congressman representing the suburbs of Sacramento. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Mclintock. Congressman Tom Mclintock, welcome.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. It's Friday, so I'll be doing much better around 3:01 p.m. Now, you are the perfect person to talk to about this because I feel like you have a perspective that maybe some of your colleagues do not. This last week, we've had issues with elderly electeds who have had senior moments happen on live television. We had Dianne Feinstein voting in a committee where instead of saying yes or no, she started launching into a speech. She seemed to be confused with what she was supposed to do. Her aides had to correct her, and then ultimately she voted. Mitch McConnell appeared to have a medical event while he was giving a press conference, and that looked awkward. He is apparently doing okay now, so we're happy about that. But clearly something went wrong there. Joe Biden seems to have these things happen to him every other day. And Nancy Pelosi said it doesn't matter that Joe Biden's old because so many of them are even older than him. Joe Biden's practically a kid by Washington standards. And a lot of people look at these events and they say, okay, these are great examples as to why we need term limits. And I tell people, I say, listen, be careful what you wish for because the alternative could be worse. In California, we imposed term limits on the state legislature because we couldn't beat Willie Brown. He was in a very safe district. He was in charge for a very long period of time. And people figured, all right, let's put term limits on the ballot, and that'll get rid of Willie Brown. Well, they got rid of Willie Brown, and I'll tell you this. I'll take Willie Brown 10 times out of 10 over what we have now. Your thoughts on how this impacts the term limits debate?
Well, I think Abraham Lincoln put it best when he said the voters are everything. If the voters get their backsides too close to the fire, they'll just have to sit on the blisters a while. It's a painful experience, but it's a learning experience. And the fact is, voters knew when they reelected her that Dianne Feinstein was quite old. Voters knew the same thing about Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell and everybody else that they elect. And let's also not forget that when he was elected, Ronald Reagan was the oldest person ever to occupy the White House, and by most people's standards, one of the best presidents we've ever had. People age at different rates. Ultimately, this is the sort of thing perhaps we should leave to voters. And as Lincoln said, we get the effect of an election is you get the person you voted for, and if it turns out to be somebody whose policies you don't like, that may be just nature's way of warning you to be a little more careful about voting in the future.
Well, and I'll tell you this: we talked about Willie Brown. I would take Dianne Feinstein in her current state 10 times out of 10 over Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, or Barbara Lee.
Exactly right. The old line attributed to, I think it was Cicero, I don't blame Caesar, I blame those who cheered for Caesar. If people have elected these folks to public office, and that is their prerogative. This is a democracy, but democracies come with a certain warning, and that is you get the government you voted for.
As someone who worked in the California legislature as a staffer before being an elected yourself, how would you compare the quality of the members and the knowledge of the members in the pre-term limits era compared to how it is now?
Well, I had a unique perspective in the legislature. I was one of the few legislators who supported term limits, and I did so because I thought it would produce an entirely different quality of individual, somebody who was, there to achieve a specific purpose and then leave, someone who'd be very skeptical of the party leadership, impervious to party pressure, and we got exactly the opposite because all we did was simply accelerate the game of musical chairs that goes on in politics, and instead of and we basically exacerbated all of the bad qualities we were trying to get rid of. That was my experience. I left the legislature in the term limits were voted on by the public in 1990, and again I supported that. In 1992, before they'd had any practical effect, I left the legislature. In 1996, I returned to the state assembly. This was the first year that the term limits had total effect. Everybody that I had served with and that I had said goodbye to in 92 was gone in 96. And in 1990, when I campaigned for the term limits, I used to say, look, grant everything the opposition has said, look at the California legislature, could it possibly get any worse? And in 1996, I had my rhetorical question answered right before my eyes. Yes, things could get a great deal worse. The two things I noticed the most is, first of all, the legislature, the elected representatives of the people, lost enormous influence over the bureaucracy. Prior to term limits, the bureaucrats would always level with the committees because they knew, A, there were people on that committee that knew as much or more than they did about the subject. Number two, there were people on that committee, if they were caught dissembling or shading the truth, could make the rest of their careers a living hell. Well, the attitude changed completely with term limits. Suddenly, bureaucrats knew. First of all, they knew more about the subject matter than these new legislators, and they knew that they would be here long after those new legislators had cycled out. The other problem you had was a lack of respect for the institution itself. Say what you will about Willie Brown, he respected the institution, and all of that went out the window as term limits took effect. The American founders considered this question very carefully during the Constitutional Convention, and they rejected the idea of term limits. They felt that the people would be the best decision makers as to whether to continue someone in office or to replace them with someone else. And they worried very much in their debates about as a politician neared the end of their term, would they be thinking as much about public interest as their own private interests.
You know, some of these nights when you get caught in the YouTube rabbit hole, you watch videos of some of these old timers talk about subject matter that they were an expert on. You watch Ken Maddie talking about water policy, and he's not even looking at notes. And you can tell, agree or disagree with whatever his position was on it, this guy knew California water policy backwards and forwards. Ross Johnson knew election law. John Burton knew parliamentary rules. You look at this current crop when they have these press conferences or they're speaking in some public forum, it's just one never-ending string of cliches. They have no idea what they're doing up there, none of them. And they're ideological, and their ideologies leading them to do whatever it is that they do, and it's been a disaster.
And it's not their fault. They don't have the time to acquire that understanding and that knowledge. They're suddenly thrust into these positions, and instead of being able to acquire all of that wisdom and knowledge over years, they're immediately recycled back out again. Well, not immediately, but within a certain period of time.
You think term limits at the federal level was just a non-starter?
Well, as I said, the American founders gave that a lot of thought, and they rejected them.
Tom Mclintock, Congressman representing the suburbs of Sacramento for California's 5th District. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Mclintock and get him online at tommcclintock.com. Congressman Mclintock, thanks so much for stopping by. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
It's always a pleasure, John. Thanks for having me. You too.
Likewise. If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Here's another good one from Steve at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. John, if we could get progressive district attorneys to throw the book at criminals as hard as Katie Porter throws mashed potatoes at her husband, California would be a safer place to live.
You know, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
He misspelled Katie Porter's last name again.
You know, at some point, we're going to have spelling quizzes, spelling tests. You know, in elementary school, I used to have one of those every Friday. Maybe we need to start having a spelling test every Friday here, because that word in particular is misspelled all the time.
Porter, Porter. There is no K in Porter.
All right. We know that the homeless population in the state of California is exploding. And it doesn't matter how much money we spend, the numbers just keep going up. The argument that we get from our local elected officials is that the homeless population isn't attracted to come here from other states because of our lax policies. It is Californians who are living on the streets primarily because of the high cost of housing.
And they say we're housing people as fast as we can, but just as much as we're doing that, so many people are falling into homelessness every single day. It's like a disease.
Well, listen to this. The mayor of Anchorage now says, his name is David Bronson, he told reporters at a news conference this week that plane tickets would be purchased for homeless people to be sent to cities where they have families who can care for them or where the climate is warmer. Quote, last year was the most deadly year in history for people who are homeless. And now this coming year with winter, we're looking at possibly doubling that. He said, noting that winters are extremely cold in Anchorage. Quote, I have a moral imperative here, and that is to save lives. And if that means giving them a few $100s for an airline ticket so they can go where they want to go, I'm going to do that, end quote. No funding has been approved yet for the relocation program, which also operated last year, but Bronson didn't anticipate any problems locating the funds. He said a total of 11 people took him up on his offer last year. Quote, I think a ticket this morning to Los Angeles is $286. It cost us $100 plus or minus a few dollars every day to house someone. And we don't have a place to put them in a large shelter this winter. And remember the objective, and it's sad that we had to get to this, but we're here to save lives. That's my job. So Anchorage, Alaska is going to use their tax dollars to buy plane tickets to send their population of homeless people to LAX.
Well, and if they're saying they're doing it because it's going to get too cold there, can we send them to Anchorage in the summer because it's too hot here?
Maybe that's the way to solve this problem.
Also, do you need to use taxpayer dollars for this? How about the mayor of Anchorage gets a big old Alaska Airlines credit card, puts all of the city's bills on it, and then you can use airline miles to fly them all down here?
Well, if you think about this, Randy, there's a lot of cold places in the United States. It's cold in Minneapolis. It's cold in Duluth. It's cold in Milwaukee. It's cold in Detroit. Cold in Buffalo, Boston, Portland, Maine. We could end up with the entire country's homeless population.
We already do.
That's pretty much the case.
If you're feeling down, if you're feeling blue, let's get help for you.
And she's going to make sure we get housing for all of them.
What could go wrong?
Oh, you're so optimistic.
All right, we've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. The Motorman, Leon Kaplan, joins us in studio. If you have a question, you want to talk to the Motorman, now's your opportunity because he has officially retired from his Sunday morning show, but you get him for one straight hour. I was about to say two. Now you get him for the 2 o'clock hour for one more hour today right here on AM 790 KABC.